Distinguished ladies and gentlemen all, first of all, let me say how happy I am to be here, to be part of this activity, because I think now most of the people in the world, I know that there are still some who are skeptic about climate change, but I know that the vast majority of people, and the science is there to support it, they are clearly telling us that we have to do something different in the world if we are going to preserve life as we know it here and to take our peoples forward. This is probably, although I know that there are many other global problems that we have to tackle, and they're all connected in some way or the other with each other, but I would clearly say that this is probably the most important global issue of our time, because it also speaks about the very survival of life as we know it on our planet. And therefore, with that kind of recognition that now exists, I think that there is necessarily a focus on the way forward on what we have to do. In one way, I think it forces us to think more globally and think of our world more in a unitary way than thinking in separate blocks, as has been done over the centuries. And now, many of the problems that have developed to cause the situation that we are in at this point in time, they must now be tackled all simultaneously for us to move forward. At the heart of many of these problems is the kind of inequality that exists within the world. The great level of inequality has created enormous poverty in many parts of the world, and that for us to tackle many of these issues, it is impossible for us to do so without tackling the issues of poverty as one of the main issues. The whole question of the world that we want to live in, we must put that we want to live in a world where we have good ecological conditions, and to have good ecological conditions, we cannot avoid tackling the issues of poverty. And in that regard, we have to look at all the question of inequality that exists within the planet itself. Look at it between countries on the one hand, and within countries as another aspect of fighting that issue of inequality. For too long, of course, we in the third world countries, we have been carrying a disproportionate burden generally in dealing with many of these issues. For instance, the whole question of the carbon emissions that is at the heart of the climate change issues have the third world countries generally have not been the main contributor to this issue. This has been done fundamentally from the developed world, and we are now being asked also to play our part. And we are willing to play our part, and we are ready to play our part in tackling these issues, but at the same time, it needs the full cooperation and support from the developed world as well. Over the years, in Guyana, we have developed a model, a low-carbon development strategy that we are working on that will see us trying to preserve about 99% of our forests, while at the same time not sacrificing social and economic development. Now, we hope in another few years that more than 90% of the energy that we will need for our development will come from renewable resources. But as I said, we need the general support, we need the support of the international community in this project as well. We have managed to develop relationship and a model with Norway in this regard, where they are paying us for carbon services that we provide. And we think that this is a model that could be examined and could be looked at in the whole question of fighting against climate change. Of course, as you know, this is a sacrifice on our part, but we also see it as a responsibility that we have because we have extensive forests, and while we recognize our own sovereignty to the forests that we have, at the same time we recognize our responsibility that we will have if we are to fight against climate change. And for that reason, I think our model that we are putting forward, while I will not prescribe it as one of the P's that we were told, word for every single country, I think it has possibilities of being adopted for various other countries that can look at, that we can adopt some of these measures, we can improve on them, and we can build on them as we struggle against the whole question of climate change. But as I've said, while we are prepared and ready to play our part in this regard, we hope that we will find partners, particularly with the developed world, in order to also work with us in trying to fight to eradicate this inequality that exists, and they also should be determined to play their part. More and more leaders internationally, and it was very heartening to hear the President of the United States in his inaugural address once more paid some close attention and expressed determination. And they also expressed the view that the United States will work very hard with the other countries of the world in fighting against climate change. And that this, I think, is very important because of the very weight of the United States in international economy as a whole. And that, I think, would be, once translated into action, once translated into reality, would be a major step forward. So I think that is what I would like to say at this point in time, at this initial stage. That one, that we cannot see the fight against climate change only in itself. It has to be connected with many of the other social issues that are affecting the world as a whole, which includes poverty, inequality, more access to social services. Education, I think, will have to play a very key role here, that we will have to make education accessible into all the sections of our society, to make it universal in many cases. In Guyana, we have managed to make primary education universal, and we are at the very verge of trying to make secondary education universal in our society as well. And we believe that this is extremely important for us in tackling many of these problems and in taking along our population with them as well. Because it is not only important that we educate people to see that they have a stake in this. They must be convinced themselves, and they must also be able to see benefits from what we are doing and what we are asking them to participate in. And in that regard, I think education is extremely important, along with the whole question of transfer of technology. Our societies, for a long time, technology has been used in sometimes even to keep other countries dependent. But I think now, more than ever, there is a need to trying to apply modern technology in everyday life of people generally, so that they can also reduce and do things in a more efficient way. And of course, that what has been mentioned here just now, the question of energy, more and more research, more and more investment in particular needs to go into renewable energy, into green energy, and to make it cheaper and make it important that people will be able to use it in many ways in order to improve their economic development. I would like to stop here at this point in time and to wait for the other part of the discussions.